with the same goals, same objectives, we feel very happy for this fraternal environment that makes us feel at home, where we can talk and learn and understand for each one of our members, friends here today. May we have a great meeting. So be it. So good morning. I hope everyone is fine. A little cold outside, isn't it? Yeah. It's coming back to us. Why we still live in denial, thinking that the winter is not here still. So today I have a talk about divine justice and how do I understand that as an immortal spirit. For many of you, or many of us, it's a very important day in our own country as well when you talk about elections and selecting a new person to take over the leadership of the country as the role of president. But that's not basically the major goal of these. No, it never would be as well, because we wouldn't be biased in that way. But what I want to talk is about justice and the feelings that aroused in our society with these disputes, right? More and more we see people attacking each other, right? People saying that was unfair, that was unjust, that is not true, that's not okay. Then we see violence and angriness taking over and a rampage, attacking everybody. So I may say something and everybody will hate me, and then somebody says something else and everybody will attack that person as well. What is it? Are we becoming judges? Are we the owners of justice? Like, why are we attacking anybody by their thoughts or their wills or their ideas? Like, should we be attacking that person? Should we try to understand that person? What is the major goal? How do I understand justice in my life? And how can I understand that as an immortal soul? Because if I believe, just to start, if I believe I can make justice with my own hands, I already deny the justice of God. Because I will disbelieve that He's able to do justice, because I take that on my own hands. Right? We think that our justice is bigger than the divine justice, which is us again being rebellious against God's will. So to start, I have 3 questions that I would like us to discuss or to think about during this talk. The reflexive questions are: what is justice? Is there a difference between the justice of the man and the divine justice? Or how do I understand justice as an immortal spirit? So I would like you to, during this talk, think about these 3 questions as well. And I have a nice parable to start. That is the parable of the unmerciful servant. How many have heard about these one? Yeah, maybe if you go through, many of you will remember that as well. So, let's see. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? And Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heavens is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay the master ordered that he and his wife and his children, and all that he had, be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him and asked, "Be patient with me," he begged, "and I will pay back everything." The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him, estrangulá-lo. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me and I'll pay it back." Yeah. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called his servant in. "You wicked servant," he said, "I canceled all the debt of yours because you begged it to me. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured, and he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. It's an interesting passage, isn't it? It's very beautiful. Because we may be the first ones to ask for forgiveness and the last ones to forgive. Right? We are the ones that believe that we should have more rights than the other people. Oh, everything happens to me. Everything is done to me. Why do I deserve this? Right? And then when it's my turn to do the good to the other person, to help them or to support them, we say, "No, like I had to went through that, so you might do that as well." Even if I had the opportunity to teach you something, you're not, because I had to learn everything by myself. So why would I? Right? And it's interesting that we see that behavior often in our lives. Let's say you start your new work in a new company, and then you need to learn something, because when we start, it's not that we are dumb or anything, it's just we don't know, right? And that's exactly, everybody's equal. And everybody needs to go to the same steps. And we need to learn. But many times we are the last ones to have patience to teach someone. But when we look back in time, we see many people that have patience with us when we'll be starting what we were doing right now. And is that justice? Is that fair? Is that the right thing? And when we look at this story, we see the servant talking to his king at first. 10,000 bags of gold, and his God forgives. But when it's his time to forgive, 10 bags of silver, or some amount that is much less than what he owed, he says no. And we can see ourselves many times in the same situation, right? And then we think that we can control, or we have the rights to do this and have the rights to do that. And everything, like, you see the words we are using, right? Like rights, laws, duty. And also in one of our studies on Monday nights, we studied the meaning of the divine laws in our lives. So we talk about the divine laws, right? So when we talk about laws, that means there is associated with justice, at least in our perspective, right? Because our law system is based, or our justice is based in a law system as well. We have many laws that we should follow. And sometimes with our laws as well. We follow the laws because we have to follow, not because we want to follow the laws. Is that the right movement as well, right? Like, oh, I can't drink and drive because the cops will arrest me. But if they didn't do that, would I still do that? Would I still drink and drive? And it's interesting because from this perspective, the justice will take place, or basically the result of our actions will take place as well. This morning, I was very sad to hear that one of my colleagues passed away back home, from university. Drinking and driving, once more, unfortunately. And she was the same age as I was, and she just had the choice of doing that or not. But that's the consequences of the acts that we perform. Sometimes it's very unfortunate, it's very sad, but we have to understand as well that we can't bend the laws of our actions, right? We can't avoid the impact of the actions that we do. So every time we do anything, every time we work with something, every time we say something, every action that we have to think about that. Because it's funny, as my boss always says, my son said, "Oh, I didn't think about it." He said, "When you didn't think about it, it's because you haven't had to start it. You shouldn't have started if you didn't think about it." So that's where the mistake was. You didn't even think about what you're going to do. So, like every action that we have, every act, everything that we have to say, we need to understand the impact that that can have as well. So we're talking about this, and we're talking about justice, and also talking how we tend to bend the justice as well to our favor, right? And we see the laws. Many times we come from a developing country where we understand that many laws are forgotten for some reason, and we don't pay what we own, and everything that I cannot pay to the government, I will do a way to go around it and not pay it, but everyone else has to pay, right? When it's my turn to receive, I have to receive, and everybody else has to pay. But when it's my time to pay, I'll not pay. And then it's very easy to blame the system. It's very easy to blame anything else. But when was my time to do the right thing? Was I trying? I was trying to take advantage of the system, or I was trying to support the system as well. So let's move on. Eric, could you please click on that? Thank you. So we have the major law, the law of justice, love, and charity. And why is it important to think about that? Many times when we do our justice is without charity and without love, isn't it? Like is a justice that is angry, that is aggressive, that tries to hurt someone. Oh, he hit me, so I should hit him back. Or he killed someone, he should be killed. We should kill them with our own hands, as happens sometimes in many countries as well, right? It's before the police even arrives, the population try to attack or to hurt the thief or the person. Like, are we doing the justice with charity and love? If we saw the servant that was owing 10,000 coins, gold or 10,000 gold bags to the owner, to the king, and we see that, and the king forgives. But when he have to seek for his own debt that's much smaller, he attacks. He chokes. The fellow servant that should be helping him should be with him. So when I think about this law of love, charity, and justice, we should think that as the law of God. So every time we face a situation, we believe it's not just, it's not fair to me, it's not right. We can believe, if we believe that that is true, we can believe that God is unjust as well, right? If something happened to me that was unfair, it's because God allowed that to happen. And if he allowed that to happen, he is unfair himself. And that's not the right way to think, right? If we believe in justice, the divine justice, taking an important role in our lives, We need to understand that everything that comes for a reason. And we need to embrace that reason with a proper understanding. You can always choose to be revolted against it. Right? I say, no, I don't believe in this. I don't agree with that. Or I should take the other hand and say, what can I learn from this? Like, oh, my mom is sick, or my grandma passed away, and it always happens to me. It's just with me. It's really just with you. It happens to many other people around you, right? If you can understand that many times you had the opportunity to have them in your life, well, many people didn't have the same opportunity. If you have the opportunity to think, that can be a lesson for you to understand more about the love and the importance they had in your life and things like that. That may be an opportunity for you to repay some of your own debts as well. Would that be unfair? Unfair would be not having those opportunities in our lives. Not having that right to pursue what is good now. Oh, it's too much work. I don't have the time. But you see, you have now the opportunity to repay many of the faults from the past. Oh, I don't believe in faults. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in that. How about feeling good? You believe in feeling good with yourself, with the people around. You understand that if you help other people, if you do good things, that will reflect on your own day, on your own life. You also become a better person if you do that with your own heart, right? From your heart. So you can see that is just in the sense that everything that we do good, we receive in the same way. When we help, when we charity, we are receiving, feeling at the same way we are doing that, right? We are receiving, at the same time I'm giving something and receiving something that is making me much happier. And basically, if you imagine that I'm giving something to someone that was in need of that, and giving some support to him, and he was really in need of that, and I can feel very well because he received something from me. I was able to help him, and I know that I can count on him in the future as well. Like everything that we do have these both ends of activity. So like everything has I have a reflection. But when we talk again about justice, charity, love, it's very important to focus in this triangle and imagine that every time we think about justice, we have to think about love and charity in the same picture. So when I see a criminal and we think about justice and we discuss how many years he should remain in prison, we should also think of charity and love in that sense. We're going to discuss this a little further in the talk. But look at this. John 15:9-17. As the Father has loved me, so I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's command and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Right? Each other is just your family, or just the ones around you, or everyone around you. So why do I extend my hand to the one in need here, but the other person I don't do that? Why I am so unfair in the treatments that I do to the people around me? And ask for fairness from God when I rebel against his ideas or I rebel against my own actions. And we understand that we had multiple lifetimes with different activities and different opportunities. Every lifetime we had brought a consequence, positive or negative, towards our own development. And many times in this lifetime, we see a result or an opportunity to repay or to work in some of the points that were missing from the other times. So when we see something in our life, we may imagine not how unfair it is or how unjust it is, but how can I use that towards my own development? If I see that, how can I face that? Should I be desperate? Should I cry? Should I be angry? Or should I try to understand that that's a normal thing, that I have to embrace it and have to grow with that as well? And many people that recover from a disease, by example, or from a cancer, they say, you know what? I learned how to give value to my life after that. Nobody really wants to go through that, right? And once you face a problem like that, a disease like that, so terrifying as well, you go through and imagine how much love is around you, how much opportunities are around you, and you give more value to your own life. And you see that opportunity helping that person to change. But what happens to me, I don't want to change. I believe that's unfair. So it's very interesting to think about that. Here I have an interesting picture from the Garden of Eden. That is one of the reasons, or one of the stories, why we're still have the idea that God is angry, or we should be afraid of God. As we discuss in the divine presence of God in our lives, one of the books that we discuss on Monday nights, it's quite interesting to see that this is just a reflect. Because if you imagine that we, our souls, or other souls that live in different places, were not living accordingly the needs or the moral needs of that specific place, and they were exiliated to our land, to here, to earth, they lost the paradise. So they bring the idea of the lost paradise to our humanity. So when we read that, we see an angry God. But again, like we see an angry God from whose perspective? For the perspective of the ones that were not willing to understand. If we see, in the other hand, that God gave them the opportunity to come, to work, to improve, develop themselves, to expiate their faults, while helped our souls here on earth to develop themselves. And then people ask why the populations in the past were so developed in many aspects. If you go back to the Egyptians, by example, they say that it will be some of these people that came with that knowledge, not moral knowledge, but the knowledge in general that helped them to develop as fast. And they would still have traits of that memory as well. If you remember well, the Egyptians, by example, would try to conserve the bodies of the people because they believed in afterlife. So they had the ideas of the afterlife, that the life doesn't end. But at the same time, they were here because they didn't agree with many of the laws or didn't behave in the proper way. When you talk about the planetary transition, we are developing our own planet to become a better place. We may see many souls that are still don't agree with that, that still want to live in anger and fight and violence, and they will be the next ones invited to go to other places as well. So this is to indicate how biased we were at one point. Imagine that God was angry at us, and everything that we'll do, God will be full of vengeance against our lives. Like, oh, if I do something, God will kill me, or God will put something in my life. I got sick because God wants that to happen. Is that true? We just saw that God is so good, that God is love. Would a father do that to any son? Would a mom do that to any son or daughter? Another biased perspective that we have regarding justice is, imagine that God would take sides in a fight. And you see here an angel leading the crusades by Gustave Doré, is a French painter. And basically, we say that God is on our side because we're going to release the Holy Land. Is that fair to the people that was living there? Was that just to them? Imagine that, like if we embrace them as brothers and sisters, we wouldn't see Palestine in such terrible environment that is right now. Could have a place where both religions could be together, enjoying the same environment, the same community, the same structures, the same holy places that they would like to adore. But no, everybody believes that God's on their side and the other ones are sinners or horrible people. It's just sad. And to continue, I have another one of the most beautiful lessons about justice that Jesus have gave to us as well. Oops. So this is a passage from the book called Boa Nova or Good News from Francisco Cândido Xavier by the spirit of Humberto de Campos, who was a Brazilian writer as well, also called Brother X, in many of his books. And as you can see, there's an immense, very huge list of books. And Humberto de Campos liked to say he was like a journalist from the other side. So many of his books are more associated with chronics and thoughts and passages. And the good news here is a book talking about the life of Jesus. When Jesus is like talking about before and after some of the passages in the Bible. So it's like a larger portion of the episode as well. So this one, we're going to talk about a very important passage where Jesus teaches about justice. Does anybody can imagine which passage that will be? It's the first time he met Mary of Magdala, Maria Magdalena. So that will be what we're going to talk about. And that's a very interesting lesson because sometimes we forget to understand what is behind those letters as well. So John was asking Jesus, Master, why didn't you condemn the prostitute? Why didn't you? She was a sinner. And then Jesus looked at his disciple calmly and kindly and asked, which are the reasons that induces you towards this condemnation? What makes you believe that is right? Do you know the reason why this woman became a prostitute? Have you faced the arrogance of the vicissitudes that she went through her life? Do you have that? Do we have that power to see what the other person had or facing in their own life before we judge them as well? Do you ignore the strength of the needs and temptations that made her fall in her path? You don't know how many times she was object of laughter of the parents, children, and brothers of the more fortunate woman. It's not just to aggravate the infernal suffering of a disturbed and nameless conscience. So you see that when Jesus interfered, when they're going to stone, the throw stones trying to kill Mary of Magdala, John was there asking why. But John was one of his apostles, one of his disciples, wasn't he? But in this book as well, we learn how much they could learn from the examples of Jesus as well. So in many of these passages, we see they doing something that we would do, and Jesus teaching them the other way around. And here John is still believing in the older law, that's the law of Moses, when the people were not still ready to understand the words of Jesus. At that moment, it should be like a denial, but that was the law of the man. That was the first revelation, right? You shall not kill, you shall not steal, you shall not this, you shall not. It was more a law to live within the society in a proper environment, and they didn't have the moral authority to understand the words of Jesus, as they didn't have at that time the moral authority, moral capacity to understand the gospel when he came afterwards as well. He came to remember us of what we have forgotten. So it's very interesting when Jesus talks. And we can imagine this in every person, in every case. And every time we say he deserves to rot in prison, he deserves to die, he deserves this, he deserves that. Every sin, the needs and temptations that he had, she had. Have you seen the moments that he was motive of laughter from other people? Have we seen how much challenges he faced in his own life? While we sometimes didn't have that, and we may say, "Oh, I face the same environment and I am much better." Well, good to you, right? But how about the other people? Should we just because you were able to do something, does it mean that everybody will do the same thing? Sometimes no. We all have our free will, right? But most of all, we need to understand that that God loves us all, and His justice is full of charity and full of love as well. So let's go on. So, however, John still said, defending the principles of the primitive law, she has sinned, and in that resides the reason of the punishment. Isn't it written, you shall pay for your own sins? Jesus calmly clarified. Nobody can say that she has not sinned, but who remains irreproachable in the face of the earth? There are priests, magistrates, and philosophers that prostituted their souls for a much lesser price. However, I still don't see anybody accusing them of anything. The hypocrisy walks around without punishment, while stones are thrown towards the suffering. God is a Father with infinite kindness, and waits the prodigal sons at his house. So you see how beautiful it is. His words indicating the best way to behave, who remains irreproachable. Because we are the first ones to throw stones, what we don't see, what is in our lives, what we did, our behavior, our acts. And then look what Jesus says. And therefore, I don't condemn the sinner to repel the sin. I don't condemn the sinner to repel the sin. In every situation, I choose to believe in good. Whenever you observe, John, the most miserable and sad souls dragging themselves in a night heavy of shadows and desolation, remember that the rough sea that surrounds the divine germ, and that one day will arouse from the deeps of the earth, or the soil, for the kiss of light from the sun. Isn't that a beautiful message? And it's interesting to see that everyone that we point the finger at and everybody that we condemn have the same nature as we have the same invitations that we have to become sons of God. And you say, oh, I don't talk to the people in the streets because they did wrong choices and I don't agree with that. Or I don't agree with these people that commit crimes. Of course, we cannot agree with that. But we have to understand, more than anything, that they are suffering souls, that they are brothers in need. You know, that there are people that did wrong choices, but in themselves, they have the same nature as we do, the same capability as we do, develop the virtues that we have, and get closer to God. So anytime we think about justice rights, we should always think about charity and love. Well, because nowadays, and it's interesting to see, even this time in Brazil with, or all over the world with social media as well, we can imagine that every one of those words is like a stone being thrown to somebody. We're throwing stones at all the people with all the messages of anger or attack, and you can imagine that basically it's the same situation 2,000 years ago happening nowadays with technology. And you see all the news accusing and pointing fingers at everyone. Like, are we throwing stones to the people again? But it's quite interesting. If you see that, and imagine that every one of us have this beautiful seed inside that has the capability to develop, to grow. How are we going to look to our brothers again, to our sisters again? Are we going to look in the same way if you have this understanding? Would I avoid them? Would I feel sick with their view? Or should I understand that they are my brothers, they are my sisters, they are the people in need, and I am in the position that I can, if I could, I can help them, I should help them as well. Because if I was in their place, wouldn't I like to receive the same kind of opportunity? So we see that many times our justice is not the same as divine justice, right? It's much, much behind. It should be a reflect of divine justice, of course. As we grow as society, as we develop morally, our laws will become more and more in accordance with the laws of God. But we must understand that we are still dwelling with our own conscience at this point, and our primitiveness is still too rough, too primitive to understand many of these aspects. But the change should start in seeing that the rough seed have the divine germ, and one day we will arouse, see the sun, is a very interesting perspective. And if you look at this, since that afternoon, when Jesus met the sinner amidst the crowd, a new thought started slowly to predominate the spirit of the world. The evangelical matter of the unforgettable teaching entered the judiciary system of all the countries. The society started to understand its obligations and started to segregate the criminals as we isolate the new person, pursuing the complete recovery with all the means available. And that's the way it indicates. But when we think about that, are just the people in prison that should be treated this way? Or everybody around us? Because, as we say, many of the crimes are not seen by the man, but are seen by God. Everything that we do, right? And a crime against a divine law may not be within our judiciary books, but it is still a crime against the law of God. So we need to understand that everybody has the potential to become closer to God, and will with time. But we can choose to attack that person or to bring that person closer to us as well. The smallest delinquents were supported by the numerous schools of regeneration.
Where is this text coming from?
From the book Boa
From the
Nova, yes.
So this is Humberto de Campos.
Humberto de Campos, yes. I did a rough translation.
No, thank you.
So the smallest delinquents were supported by the numerous schools of regeneration. The complete system of the human justice evolved towards the principle of magnanimity, and the modern judges, who writing their sentence without ever handling the New Testament, may ignore that they proceed in the way they proceed because Jesus was the great reformer of criminology. Isn't that interesting? When we talk about divine justice and we see Jesus giving Such a beautiful example to us that changed the way we see justice and criminology in the same sense. Because we imagine in the past they would hang, they would kill, they would burn, and nowadays that doesn't happen anymore. Hopefully not.
Depends on the country, right?
Yeah. So we see that the opportunity to give somebody a time to change or to be reclusive for some time as an ill person that needs help, support, to develop their own virtues and wills is important. So it's important to understand that they shouldn't rot in prison. They should learn in prison. They should develop in prison. They should become better. That my brother, my sister, somebody had attacked me. I have to understand that that had a reason as well. She may felt angry because something. We are not here to judge anyone. Right? We need to understand. We need to embrace, and we need to always say thank you for the opportunities that we receive. Because if you go back to that first story, when we talk about the unmerciful servant, the one that is forgiven by his king, but attacks his fellow servant as well. We can imagine ourselves in the same situation. And basically, with these two perspectives, we have two images in our mind right now. We can be either, the servant attacking the other one, or we could follow Jesus' examples when he said them to stop the stoning of Mary of Magdala. So we could attack, we are the ones throwing stones, or it could be the ones saying for that to stop. And in this perspective, it's very interesting what we can learn from these beautiful examples. We see Jesus as that beautiful soul that came here to help us to understand many of the divine wills, many of the divine laws, how to bring that to our lives. And in such a moment where we see such aggressivity, such angerness all over the society, we need to understand as well that we cannot change each other's minds, right? Like I cannot be a judge, I cannot impose anything to you. I cannot force you to do anything. But we can start that in our own lives. And a beautiful example as well is this place that we are sitting here. If the place was not started before, we wouldn't have this place today. All the opportunities that we have to help each other might not be present in this exactly location at this point. Right? If you don't imagine that if we didn't start to receive the first person that was in need, a shelter was not being placed. How many people are needed to start something? Right? We need 2,000 people to start something. We need 100,000 people, or I have to start that myself. Many of these big cases that we see many times in Brazil was one person receiving many sick person at her house or the gymnasium or something like that, and start to help them. And from that, something bigger would start. But it needs to be starting on you. Stopping, sorry, thinking that we can wait for that to happen or wait for other people to come and do that in our places. That's also not fair. Not fair with us. It's not just. Because we may imagine that we have our needs and we need to develop our own virtues. We have to deal with our own conscience. We have to learn how to better follow the steps from God. But at the same time, we are not imposing that to anyone. So it's quite interesting to imagine that as well. And unfortunately, when elections come anywhere, including back home, we see a lot of violence taking place. Not just physical, but verbal violence. Every situation, every conflict that we may see is a reflect of unfairness. Like if we had received it or really followed the invitation of love and understanding, of charity and fraternity, we wouldn't be fighting so much against each other's rights. Right? It's quite beautiful. And you can imagine as well, as a beautiful perspective, that Jesus helped Mary of Magdala at that day, right? And what happened afterwards? She started following him. She started following him. She was one of his disciples. And you can see the immense change that had place inside herself. Is one of the beautiful examples of transformation and leadership that we have in another book. So we see Mary of Magdala receiving an opportunity, accepting Jesus in her life and changing. And you see the power of that transformation, how much that impacted her life. If you see Paul, you see how much he changed after accepting the invitation as well. And many times in my life, I use it to say, oh, people will not change. People will not change from what they did before. But we learn and we change our points of view as well, that people will change. They need the right support, they need the help. We're not the judges that are denying them the opportunity to do this and to them. We should be supporting, should be helping, extending our hands to them. And with the time, everybody will change. And we see with these beautiful examples that the change can indeed take place within ourselves, within the ones around us, within the society, within each one of us. So, you have any comments, any questions, any points? We have a few minutes still. We can imagine that many times in our life, the judge of our own acts is our own conscience, right? And understanding that the conscience is here to help and not to attack is another very important one. Because we try to erase our conscience, we try to mute our conscience, we try to not allow that to speak. While we can understand that the conscience is there as an alarm, trying to identify the right and the wrong according to divine laws in our lives. And it's impressive, and the word is indeed impressive to see the impact of the conscience in the lives of many, because they thought they could raise the conscience, they thought they could go around it, they fool the conscience, and then they wake up in the other side with the same problems. There's a book from André Luiz, Action and Reaction, a song he has sung, that talks about that as well. About help to the brothers that wake up in the other side. Imagine that it would be released of the guilt they were carrying their whole life because they were judging themselves. I mean, the answer is not feel guilty or not judge yourself, is to understand, accept yourself, understand that one act, word was not the best, was not the proper at that time. But what we can do, can we go back and change it? Or can we learn from that and not do that again in our lives?
To go forward and change.
Yes. Yes, go forward and change, yes. Yes, yes, Francisco Xavier had that beautiful saying that we cannot go back and make a new beginning, but we can start right now and make a new ending. And that's really true. In another one of the books, I forgot the title now, but it's from André Luiz as well. In the other side, many of these brothers that had a conscience problem would be judged by a fake judiciary system So like the other spirits will try to take advantage of their guilt because it's quite interesting that they would have whole ceremony, like they were the judges and this and that. They could judge him or her to do this, and they would pretend to be spirits from a higher order. While we imagine that God indeed, as a loving Father, will not allow that to happen. But it's our own belief that fools us. To believe that God is not good to us, that God is unfair, and everything that happens in my life doesn't have a reason, and everything that happens in my life is because I don't deserve it, because I am a victim. And we know that victims, they don't exist. So it's within us the power to change and understand it. See what the kids has for us today. There they come. Como é que já chamou? Já estão vendo?
Very good. Right, so.
Vamos ver o que eles aprontaram hoje também. Hi, Sophie.
Okay, so first let's tell everybody Sophie, tell everybody who you have in your hands.
It's an egg.
What's his name?
It's Eggy Bird.
Okay. And Egbert was new at school, right?
Yeah.
And how were the kids treating Egbert when he was new?
Not nice. Not nice.
Not nice. Were they sharing with him?
No.
Were they respecting him?
No.
Were they helping him?
No.
Okay, so let's show everybody how he felt at first. Oh, why did he think that?
That's sad.
Because he was really sad. And then, how did the kids start? To treat him? That's not gonna work. How did the kids start to treat Edward?
Nice.
Nice. So they were kind to him. What else they did? Did they respect Edward?
Yeah.
Okay. And they shared with him?
Yeah.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Did they introduce more friends to him?
Yes.
Yeah. And then when we started being fair to Edward and treat him like we treat everybody, what happens, Sophie? What happens to Edward? So instead of sinking, what happened now?
Float.
Why?
Because he's happy.
Because now he is happy. Because people are being kind, right?
Yeah.
To him. Sharing.
Yes.
What else, Maria?
I know. I floated.
Yeah. What did you give Egbert when you mixed good stuff here? Do you remember? Happiness. And you helped him, right? You helped him color a picture. And that made him feel how?
Happy.
Very happy. So that's what happens when we treat people fairly, to make them happy. Good job, guys.
Hey, hold on. Have just say happy birthday to Sophie.
Oh, yeah.
So this little girl is part of this spirit center since its creation. And has been a very brave. I would like to sing happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sophie. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, Sophie.
All right, so we'll go to the classes now.
Okay, you guys, let's go back to wait for the pass. Yeah, let's go. Let's go wait for the pass. Let's go. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna pick you up. Don't worry. I'm not gonna pick you up.
Pode ajudar? Fazer a final prayer?
So I invite you to close your eyes, elevate your thoughts to God. Thank you for this beautiful opportunity to talk about justice, to understand more about justice with our own lives, to see the examples that were given to us, to think about them. For the beautiful image that each one of us has, this beautiful seed waiting to grow, and that the path of fraternity, love, charity, and justice is the path towards our future as souls and as society. Thank you for this beautiful place, for this beautiful day. So be it.
Yes.